My wife found a teddy bear in our mailbox with a note. He still looks like you. I'll be waiting when you realize. At first, I thought it was some sick prank until I recognized the handwriting. It was my ex, the one I hadn't spoken to in almost 10 years. I tried to hide it from my wife, pretended it was nothing. But yesterday my ex showed up at my daughter's school and told her she was her real mom. I met her when I was 19, back in college. She was that kind of girl who could walk into a room and somehow make everyone else look like background extras in her movie. Bright, loud, dramatic in every way. I was the opposite, quiet, awkward. The type of guy who thought a good Friday night was pizza and a video game. And maybe that was the hook. She made me feel alive, like suddenly my boring life had color splashed all over it. The first few months with her were intoxicating. She'd call me at 2 a.m. just to go for a drive, blasting music with the windows down, screaming lyrics at the sky. She said she loved how I stared at her, how I balanced out her chaos. I thought that was romantic back then. Now, looking back, it was a warning. Her highs were unbelievable, lavish surprises, passionate declarations, an intensity I'd never known. But her lows, that's where the cracks started to show. She'd go through my phone if I was in the shower too long. Once, I didn't reply to her text during a lecture, and she showed up outside the classroom demanding to know why I was ignoring her. I told myself it was just love, just passion that we dated for almost 2 years, and I swear, half of that time I was either in the best moment of my life or the worst fight I'd ever had. She broke up with me at least 4 times, always in dramatic fashion, screaming, crying, throwing things. And then, like clockwork, she'd come back. Each time, she'd swear she had changed, that we were meant to be. And I believed her. Until the last time. That final breakup wasn't even one I initiated. She cheated. With one of my friends. And the worst part? She didn't even deny it. She told me, straight-faced, "I just wanted to see if you'd fight for me." I walked away and never looked back. It was messy, humiliating, and it took me a long time to rebuild any kind of trust after her. Years later, I met my wife, completely different from her in every possible way. Where my ex was chaos, my wife was calm. Where my ex thrived on drama, my wife valued peace. I finally felt like I could breathe. We built a life, we had 2 kids, and honestly, I thought I had left all of that toxicity far, far behind me. The first sign she was back didn't even register as serious at the time. A friend from college mentioned that she'd asked about me at a reunion I didn't attend. Then, a random email from an unknown account showed up, saying, "Do you ever think about me?" I deleted it immediately, blocked the address, and convinced myself it was nothing, but then it escalated. The teddy bear in the mailbox wasn't just creepy, it was personal. The note mentioned my son, by name. She must have been watching us. I recognized her handwriting instantly, the way she curled her lowercase y, the little heart she always used instead of a dot above the I. My stomach dropped the second I saw it that I didn't tell my wife. I know that sounds awful, but what was I supposed to say? "Hey honey, remember that unstable ex I haven't seen in a decade? She's suddenly leaving gifts for our kids." I told myself it was a one-time thing, maybe closure on her part, something she'd get out of her system. But deep down, I think I knew it wasn't going to stop there, and I was right. Because the next time, it wasn't a gift in our mailbox. It was her showing up in person. The first time she showed up again in person, it was so mundane that at first, my brain didn't even register what was happening. I was pulling into the grocery store parking lot with my daughter in the back seat. She was singing along to some cartoon-themed song, and I was half distracted, running through the mental list of what we needed for dinner. I opened the car door, turned to unbuckle my daughter, and that's when I heard it, my name. Not the way my wife says it, soft and casual. This was sharp, almost triumphant, like someone had just spotted a prize at an auction. My name. I froze. My daughter was still humming, swinging her legs. And there she was, standing by a cart corral, leaning against it like she had been waiting for me. 10 years. 10 years, and she looked almost exactly the same. A little older, sure. More lines around her eyes. But the same hair she used to toss dramatically when she was angry. The same smirk that always meant trouble. I swear my stomach flipped in that moment, like my body remembered everything my brain wanted to forget. I muttered her name before I could stop myself. My daughter immediately perked up. "Who's that, Daddy?" And my ex. God. She crouched down, smiled at my daughter, and said, "Hi, sweetheart. I'm a very old friend of your daddy's." The audacity of it hit me like a slap. She didn't even ask, didn't hesitate, just inserted herself right there. I pulled my daughter close and said, probably too sharply, "We are leaving." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, come on. Don't be like that. I just wanted to see you. It's been forever." Her eyes flicked to my daughter again, and something in her gaze made my skin crawl. Not maternal. Not warm. It was possessive. Like she was looking at something that belonged to her that I didn't stick around. I shoved the cart away, buckled my daughter back in, and drove off without saying another word. My hands were shaking on the wheel. That night, I finally told my wife. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore, not after she had seen our kid. My wife's face went pale as I explained, step by step, from the teddy bear to the parking lot. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice tight that I had no good answer. Shame, maybe. Fear. I tried to explain that I thought it was nothing at first, but the look she gave me said she wasn't buying it. She wasn't mad at me, exactly, but she was scared. "This isn't just about you anymore," she said, glancing toward the kids' room. She involved them. And she was right. That was the part one couldn't shake. My ex wasn't trying to reconnect with me. She was circling my family. The next week, it got worse. My wife picked up our son from school, and one of the teachers mentioned a friend of the family had stopped by earlier, asking questions. My wife's blood ran cold. She asked for details, and sure enough, it was her. She had walked right into the school, smiled, said she was close with the family, and asked which classroom our son was in. Thank God the staff didn't tell her much, but the fact that she even tried? That was a line crossed. My wife came home shaking, furious, terrified that we argued that night. Not because we were against each other, but because fear makes people fight. She demanded we call the police. I said we didn't have enough. What could we even report? My crazy ex left a teddy bear and asked about our kid. I knew how that would sound, but deep down, I also knew she wasn't going to stop. My ex never let go of anything in her life, not until she burned it to the ground, and part of me started to wonder, why now? Why, after all these years, was she back? After the incident at the school, everything changed inside our house. The air felt heavier, like a storm was constantly waiting just outside the windows. My wife became hypervigilant, checking the locks 3 or 4 times before bed, drawing the curtains earlier than usual, jumping whenever headlights swept across our street at night. I tried to act calm, to be the rational one, but inside I was just as shaken. I had known this woman when we were both young and reckless, but I had never truly seen what obsession could look like with 10 years of festering silence behind IT. First it was small things. Packages left on our porch with no return address. Flowers, always white roses, tied together with the same red ribbon. Sometimes a card slipped into the wrapping, not signed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. On one card the words were simple, "This is what you used to buy me." Another one, "Don't you miss it when life was real?" My wife would hold these cards like they were poison, afraid to even touch them too long. She started photographing everything, keeping a little folder on her phone with timestamps, dates, evidence. She wanted to be ready to show the police if things escalated. I still clung to the hope that this was just a phase, some flare-up from her side that would eventually fade. I kept telling myself she would get bored and move on. But that hope grew thinner each week. It wasn't just gifts. There were phone calls too, numbers I didn't recognize, always hanging up the moment I answered. Sometimes I would hear breathing, the faint shuffle of someone who wanted to speak but didn't. Once, when I let the call go to voicemail, there was a recording of silence broken by a faint hum of a song. It was the same song she used to play in her car late at night when we first dated. The one she said was ours. Hearing it again after all those years made my stomach clench so hard I thought I'd be sick. My wife didn't need convincing anymore. She set up cameras around the house, even though we lived in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happened. One morning we checked the footage and saw a figure at the edge of the yard, just out of the reach of the porch light. The shape was blurry, impossible to prove, but I knew the posture, the tilt of the head. She had been standing there, watching, not approaching. Just waiting nights became the worst. My wife and I barely spoke before bed anymore. Instead, we lay awake, listening for sounds, imagining shadows shifting in the hallway. Our kids, thankfully, were too young to sense the depth of what was happening. They noticed the flowers, they asked about the packages, but we made up excuses, a mistake, a neighbor's delivery, just junk mail. We wanted to keep their world intact. The hardest part for me was the memory she dragged up without even being there. Every gift, every card, every detail was chosen to remind me of moments from our past. It was like she wasn't just haunting my present life, but trying to resurrect the old one, piece by piece, and wedge it into the space where my family now lived. I could almost feel her rewriting history in her head, convincing herself that this was still her story, that she was supposed to be here instead of my wife. One evening, as I was taking the trash out, I noticed something taped to the side of the bin. A photograph. It was an old picture of me, from college, clearly taken. Without my knowledge. I was walking across campus, headphones in, backpack slung over my shoulder. On the back of the photo, in her handwriting, were 4 words, "Still yours. Always mine." That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own. She wasn't reaching out for closure or nostalgia. She wasn't reminiscing. She was laying claim, like everything in my life, my house, my wife, my children, was an extension of the relationship she had decided never ended. I took the photo inside, showed my wife, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. That went beyond worry for the kids. She was afraid of me, not because I had done anything wrong, but because my past had come crashing into our present with a force neither of us could control, and the worst part was the growing certainty that she was only just beginning. It escalated faster than I could process. One week she was just leaving things at the edge of our property. The next, she was directly inserting herself into our daily life. First real shock was when my wife opened the door one afternoon and found our daughter on the porch holding a small wrapped box. She said a nice lady gave it to her while she was playing in the yard. Inside was a necklace, cheap but familiar. It was the exact same one she had worn the night she told me she loved me for the first time. My wife didn't speak for a full minute after opening it. She just took the necklace, locked it in a drawer, and moved our kids inside like we were under siege. 2 days later, our son came home from school with a drawing in his backpack. Crayon scribbles of a woman holding hands with a man and 2 children. None of it in his usual style. When my wife asked where it came from, he said a lady at recess gave it to him and told him to keep it. The figure of the woman had long hair, drawn exactly like hers. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept walking the halls of our house, listening for every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside. Around 2 a.m., I glanced at the baby monitor we still kept in our youngest's room. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. There was movement, someone standing by the window. By the time I ran in, the room was empty. But the curtains were swaying, the latch on the window slightly undone. The final straw came at the end of that week. My wife went out to the car in the morning and found the windshield covered with notes, dozens of them, each one saying the same thing in her looping handwriting: "You're living my life." By then it was no longer about hesitation or doubt. It was clear she wasn't just obsessed with me. She wanted to erase my wife completely and step into her place. Calling the police felt like admitting defeat. For weeks I had convinced myself I could shield my family, that she was just a ghost from the past scratching at the edges of our life. But the night with the window, the morning with the windshield, it broke that illusion. My wife was the one who made the call. I sat beside her at the kitchen table, silent, while she explained everything to the officer on the line. She sounded calmer than I expected, but her knuckles were white as she gripped the phone. When the patrol car arrived, 2 officers walked through our yard, took photos of the notes, and asked us to hand over the necklace, the cards, the packages. They were professional but detached, like this was just another domestic dispute that would probably fizzle out. They explained what we already feared. Unless she directly harmed someone or broke in, it was hard to press charges. Still, they agreed to file a report, and one of them looked at me a little too long when he asked why I hadn't come to them sooner. My wife set up even more cameras, this time inside the house. She stopped letting the kids play outside unless one of us was standing right there. It felt like prison, but safety mattered more than freedom. The kids noticed, of course. They started asking why they couldn't ride bikes down the street or play with the neighbor kids anymore. We lied. We said we were just being careful. A week later, we got the footage that turned my stomach. She had walked straight up to our front door in the middle of the night. No mask, no attempt to hide. She stared into the camera for a full minute, smiling faintly, then set down another box. Inside was a baby blanket. Not one that belonged to our children, one that had belonged to her niece years ago. I remembered it because I had been there when she gave it as a gift at a family baby shower back in college. She had kept it all this time, and now she was placing it at our doorstep like an offering. The police took that visit more seriously. They started driving through our street more often, leaving their presence known. But she wasn't deterred. If anything, she seemed emboldened, like she wanted us to know she wasn't afraid of being seen. The worst moment came one Friday afternoon. My wife went to pick up our daughter from school and found her already standing with someone else near the gate. From a distance, it looked like a teacher. When my wife got closer, she saw the truth. Our daughter was holding her hand. My wife screamed her name, and the woman let go immediately, vanishing into the crowd of parents and cars before security could react. My daughter said she had introduced herself as Mommy's friend. That night, my wife broke down completely. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse me. She just sat on the kitchen floor and cried until she couldn't breathe. I sat with her, helpless, realizing this wasn't just obsession anymore. This was a battle for the very center of our family and, deep inside, a thought I didn't want to face started to grow. She wasn't going to stop until one of us was destroyed. After the school incident, everything shifted. The school tightened their security. Our kids were only released directly to us or a staff member, and the principal personally assured us they would call the police if she ever set foot near the building again. That should have made me feel safer, but instead it only made the threat feel more real. It wasn't abstract anymore. She had touched our child's hand. The police started taking us seriously, but bureaucracy moved at its own pace. We filed for a restraining order, sent in all the evidence we had collected, the notes, the footage, the blanket, everything. While we waited for a hearing date, she continued to circle us like a predator that had already marked its prey. The patrol cars drove past, sometimes parking nearby, but she knew the gaps in their coverage. One night, long after midnight, the cameras caught her again. This time she wasn't smiling. She was pacing on the sidewalk in front of our house, holding something in her hand, what looked like a photograph. She kept tearing pieces off, scattering them onto the pavement, then staring up at our windows. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, watching every shadow, every flicker of headlights on the walls. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. We woke to pounding on the door at 3 a.m. Not from her, but from the police. They had found her. Apparently, a neighbor down the street had called about a woman sitting in her car with the engine off for hours. When officers checked, it was her. In the passenger seat, they found notebooks filled with my name, our kids' names, our address, written over and over. Pages of rambling, obsessive thoughts about reclaiming what was stolen. She was taken into custody, and for the first time in months, the house felt breathable again. But the relief was tangled with something else, unease, dread. Because even as we sat at the kitchen table the next morning, drinking coffee in silence, my wife said what I had already been thinking: custody was temporary. A restraining order was paper. None of it meant she would stop. When the court hearing finally came, I had to stand in front of a judge and outline every detail of our history. I had to say her name out loud, describe her behavior, recount the way she had touched our daughter, the packages, the blanket, the late-night visits. My wife sat beside me, gripping my hand, but the shame still burned. It felt like my past was poisoning our present in front of strangers in suits. The restraining order was granted. She wasn't allowed within 500 feet of us, our home, or their kids' school. The judge warned her directly, and for the first time I saw her in the flesh again. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared at me with a look I can't forget. Not rage, not sadness, but certainty. Like in her mind, this wasn't over, just delayed. Driving home that day, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. This was never about love, or even obsession with me as a person. It was about control. She couldn't stand that I had walked away, that I had built a life without her. My family wasn't just my own. It was, in her twisted logic, proof that she had lost. and she was fighting to erase that loss, life has slowly returned to a kind of normal. The kids still don't understand the full picture, though sometimes. They ask why Mommy gets nervous when she sees a strange car parked on the street. My wife and I don't leave packages on the porch anymore. We double-check the locks without thinking. We've adapted, but even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling that she's waiting. Not every night, not every day, but somewhere. Out there, keeping watch, convincing herself the story isn't finished, and maybe that's the hardest part. Knowing she doesn't need to be here to still haunt this house. Months have passed since the court order. The patrol cars stopped circling our street. The school no longer calls us into the office with worried faces. Our neighbors smile again when we wave from the driveway. From the outside, it looks like we've moved on inside our home, though she's still present in small ways. My wife keeps the evidence box locked in the closet. Notes, photographs, the necklace. She says it's for just in case, but I know it's because throwing it away feels unsafe, like tempting fate. The cameras are still up, humming quietly in the background, reminders that trust in the ordinary world was broken. Our kids are happy. They don't ask anymore about the lady or the strange gifts. For them, life has truly returned to normal. For us, it never fully will. I don't check the mailbox without thinking of that teddy bear. I don't walk into my daughter's room without glancing at the window latch. I don't look at old photos of myself from college without wondering if she has copies hidden somewhere. The truth is, she doesn't need to show up again. She already left her mark. My family is safe now, but the shadow of her obsession will always live at the edge of our lives, reminding me of a choice I made a decade ago that somehow never really ended, and maybe that's the cruelest part. You think the past stays behind you, until one day it shows up at your door, smiling like it never left.